This is Joan. In this video, we've recorded an example of the reflect, share, integrate process. There's meanings that come from the outside and there's meanings that come from the inside. So I'm really curious about processes that create space for scaffolding understanding in a way that you own, regardless of who your professors are in this case. Now, I first got interested in this from a teaching point of view. I teach, for example, a Modern 1 class. And those are students who are interested in a whole range of things and not necessarily interested in dancing for the rest of their lives. They're doing it for another reason, which is very different from a Modern 3 or a Modern 4 class, or even an upper level composition class, where those are folks who the class they're in is something they actually are passionate about already and want to keep doing. So I got interested in how do I make Modern 1 relevant in the sense that there's space to draw connections. So for me, it's centering, helping you all know that you're the center of your world and not necessarily the classes being the center. Sometimes coming out of high school, it's which you're now far from, but coming out of high school, it can be, I must adapt to these teachers and do as they say, rather than I must take in what's being offered and organize it for myself. So that's where I'm coming from. So I'd like to do an exchange at these two tables amongst yourselves. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a timer for 2 minutes. And this is not a traditional conversation. It's a no crosstalk opportunity to be listened to. So nobody's going to debate your points. Nobody's going to solve a question or answer a question for you. It's a chance to think out loud with attention. Amongst yourselves, you can decide for a second, third, and whoever wants to start.
So should we start like based off of the reflection?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Start there. Yeah. But see if it leads you somewhere else. Great. And 2 minutes may feel like a long time. I don't know. We'll see. Okay.
Who's going first?
Here we go. Figure out who's first.
So it made me scared me.
And that's the third round. Good. All right. So as you listen to each other, I'm just now curious. And what's interesting for me also is that this isn't a class. So therefore, what you all are bringing is going to be highly variable. But as you sat and listened to each other, I'm curious to know either what you heard broadly speaking, or if there were moments of common ground that you just could name with what somebody else said, or something surprising that was so far away from where you had been taking the question, but was interesting to you simply because it was a surprise. So I'm curious to hear. Yeah.
I feel like, so, we're all graduating, so we're all kind of like, and we also are all studying things that aren't necessarily directly relevant to our next steps. And so I feel like we're all kind of at this point of like, we've spent the past 4 years like working really hard on these things, but now we're faced with like, all right, here's like my grad school or my job that doesn't necessarily quite apply. And just kind of trying to reckon with like, how do we contextualize that? How do we like place those experiences into the greater like trajectory of our lives and find that meaning, even if it's not going to be directly impacting that next step?
It sounds scary. Sounds so scary.
How's it scary?
it just like to like study something for so long and then to like feel like you really want to do something different and to figure out how like that's gonna work out. It's tough.
You're right. It is pretty scary.
I think for our table, like one of the common things is like taking classes like towards our major that like we don't really want to take, but we have to anyways.
And so the fact of that, or anything else in terms of how each of you respond to that stuck with you at all?
I think it's more of like you gotta do what you gotta do kind of.
I think it was interesting that with Jada, I don't know if you realize this, you kind of were saying that like you were taking all these classes for your chemistry degree, but then you're like, but I don't really know if I even want to do chemistry. Maybe I should just do public health, which honestly sounds like it makes more sense with what you said you want to do. So it is. I think it's interesting how maybe we all kind of like get this thing in our mind if we're going to do this major, and then you kind of have to decide very quickly if you want to do that or not, and if not, you're kind of screwed unless you want to take a few extra years to get the credits to switch.
I feel like there's also a feel like picking the major you feel like will give you the most prestige.
Yeah.
Like I've as a theater major, I've gotten a lot of. I remember one year I was in a class and I was like, oh, I won't be able to take like the next level of this because I have to take something from my theater major. The entire class started like cackling when I just said the term theater major. Like the punchline was, look at her, she's studying to do like theater things.
How dare they?
So it's like I've kind of like developed this like defensive, like, oh, self-deprecating, kind of funny, but like also I would do this. But I feel like there's a sense like when you're picking your major, you want to pick the one that people feel like, oh, you're studying that, nice. And I feel like that kind of will push people towards majors they might not want to do.
Really interesting. Really interesting. I don't want to cut you off. Any other thoughts or?
Well, yeah, I was gonna say our table, it was interesting how everybody, like we all are, like Katie said, we're all kind of studying things that we're not necessarily going into directly after college, but we all kind of found meaning in those studies in certain ways. So like Katie was like, it gave you a lot of like confidence in terms of analyzing things to do those like sociology classes. And like Jacob, you got really into science communication and you realized that was like important for you. So it's cool how we kind of turned that like seeming non-relevance into being like, well, like actually it gave us some good things along the way. So
Yeah, that's great. Great. So if this were a course, I would be linking what you've said back to like my next topic or my next project. But I get to follow your lead today. So I actually have my own answers to these questions from when I was an undergrad that I want to share. But I'd also like to just responding, because I didn't know, of course, what anybody would say, but just responding to what I'm hearing. I want to just throw out the thought that the relevance piece is you. Your existence, who you are, that's where the relevance lives. And the seniors have started to figure that out because they're saying, yeah, I'm studying this, but I'm going to do this. But you know what? It was useful to do that because it happened in you. It's where it lives. And so the scariness is when that's on the outside, but knowing that over time, you're going to, this information that, and your professors mean well, we mean so well. We really want to share these things with you because we care about them. But it can sometimes maybe feel a little bit like it's being enforced in a certain way because you got the syllabi and you got the requirements and you got the grades. You got the whole structure here, an academic structure that can feel like it's aimed at you, like you're a target rather than a vessel that's doing its own mixing. But I'm hearing differing ways of reacting to sort of what the outside is saying about what the value of what you're doing is. So, but I wanted to share, this is a piece, something I recommended faculty to do, which is tell your own story to put the context that this isn't just about you, it's about any student. So, because I was an undergrad once, and I was so careful. I was so careful. I was way too careful. Well, no, I was who I was. at 18, 19, 20. I shouldn't be hard on her. I thought, no, you can't take 300 level courses till you've taken the 200 level course. You have to, there's an order. I thought there was an order to things that would be safest to follow. And it took me a while to understand that may not have been true. So I remember being very careful. I'd be curious to know if you thought about things that you've already thought about before and got to take a little further, or if this little process pointed to something that was slightly different than something you've contemplated before. I'd just be curious to hear.
I would say I've thought about these things before. Yeah.
I think the one that I brought in, the example I thought about before, but then when I was here, like saying the thing about the crime and my specific major, I've definitely like thought about it very abstractly before, but it was, I think, something maybe Katie or Claire, I don't know, one of you said that kind of like made me put it to words kind of, or like realize it.
Great.
I've definitely thought about it for myself, but it was cool hearing those same feelings echoed in other people. Because I guess I always think of like you come to college, or like everybody except for me is coming to college and they're majoring in exactly what they're going into, and it's like no, like that's silly. Everybody is coping with these things.
We're like other girls.
Oh no, like other girls. Yeah, we're all going through the same or similar things. Yeah.
I guess that's the thing. There are so many paths to take in life. There's so many perspectives to gain in life. So here's the thing. It's like, even if you are in a major that is directly relevant to what you're going to study, like I studied theater and I will be going to theater school. But like nothing is going to be a direct, perfect feeder into your life. It's almost like Legos. Like when you're picking up, like,
don't change the shape of Legos, but all right.
I know, I'm not saying, but you can fit a Lego into any number of structures. If you give me a little orange brick, I can make that like part of a house. I can make it part of a garden. I can make it part of a Death Star. I mean, an orange Death Star, but that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like there are so many different things you can do with it. Like, when kids, they have like, I'm going to go on a Lego metaphor here. You get a whole bunch of different sets, and then sometimes you just mix them together and they just go rogue and build whatever they want with whatever they have. And sometimes you have Darth Vader at your ballet recital.
I go rogue with your life. Put Darth Vader in the ballet recital. Yeah, I mean, this is right there. That's what I'm thinking about, or at least was thinking about with these particular questions. Yeah. Anyone else with just thoughts or feedback about just this very short process that you just did?
I think part of why I really like this conversation is not just looking into the future, but also accepting what we're doing now. Like there are classes I'm taking right now that maybe I don't have like negative feelings about, but it's hard to sort of get excited about them, And I think it is nice to sort of feel like, well, hey, this will apply at some point. I will get something out of this. I think that's a nice attitude to come into a class with.
Yeah.
Even if it's learning, it's not for you.
It's an orange Lego piece.
Right, exactly. I don't know where this will fit into my ballet recital, but at some point, it'll
Yeah. And again, I'll go back to it's because you're the relevant point.
Yeah.
In the diagram. The diagram isn't outside of yourself. The diagram is built from you.
I feel like instructors will often be very comfortable bringing their own relevance to the classroom. Like that is almost their job, right? It's like, we're going to do this class and I'm going to like bring my own expertise and my own like understanding of the world. And that's going to be what I present in this class.
Yes.
And I think a lot of students, including myself, sometimes struggle with bringing our relevance, right?
Yes.
Like we are a room full of people who also have interesting experiences to connect. And like, that is the value that we have in that room. And I think a lot of times students get into that receiving mode of like, oh, I'm just going to like soak up your relevance, but like we have our own.
Great way of saying it. Yeah. And for me, I think professors, all of the folks in the room with you who have been dubbed the leader of the pack for the moment, because their name is on the course listing. This is partly about making space for students to bring themselves into the class. And it's partly like I teach better when I know that students are coming into my class from places that I hadn't even imagined necessarily. Like I'm just a better teacher because there's like a space in my brain for that little tidbit of information of, yeah, this person does computer science. I'm going to talk about zeros and ones, or this person is calculus, and it's like we're going to work with our sine and cosine curves here with the path and space, right? To just know that the thing that helped me understand the thing that I love isn't necessarily the door my students will be able to walk through. So how do I find all those other doors as a way to connect? Yeah. So that's what I've been working on, trying to find words. I'm a dancer, so I'm nonverbal. So finding words for a process that makes the classroom kind of a shared learning space, not just with the professor leading it with their own insights, but finding a way to get more information and also more internal processing for the individuals in the class. So
Thank you, Joan.
I thank you for this.